How does a broke backyard mechanic manage to fool billionaires, Hollywood, and even Warren Buffett with a product that barely worked? Jeff Carpoff didn't set out to change the world, but he ended up building one of the biggest green energy scams in American history. His story is not about an American dream. It's about a billion-dollar illusion, where the promise of easy tax money blinded everyone who should have known better. What started as a humble idea scribbled on a napkin would spiral into a fraud so audacious that it snared some of the smartest minds in finance, leaving a trail of wreckage that still shocks investigators today. Jeff Carpoff grew up in Martinez, California, a town best described as rough around the edges. Industrial fumes hung over its streets, crime rates were high, and the sense of opportunity was painfully small. Jeff didn't have a trust fund, a fancy college degree, or any powerful family connections. Instead, he survived by learning to hustle, drifting between odd jobs and flirting with addiction and petty crimes. He had no illusions of becoming a tech mogul. His biggest dream was to provide a stable life for his wife Paulette, who had been with him since high school. For a while, that dream seemed to come true when Jeff opened a Land Rover repair shop. He was good at fixing things, good at talking to customers, and the business actually worked until it didn't. One terrible financial decision torpedoed the shop in 2007. The collapse left Jeff deeply in debt, with a mortgage he couldn't afford and a family teetering on the edge. Desperation pushed him back to selling drugs, the only quick cash he knew. But even that couldn't solve his mounting problems. With nowhere else to turn, Jeff grabbed a solar panel sales job and stumbled across a problem he couldn't get out of his head. Customers loved solar panels, but they hated the idea of expensive equipment getting stolen from their roofs. Jeff wondered, what if the panels could move? What if you could put them on a trailer, lock them up, and park them anywhere? It was a light bulb moment, even if the bulb was a bit dusty. Jeff, who had zero engineering training, grabbed a napkin and started sketching. He called in his brother-in-law, another backyard mechanic, and together they started cobbling together a prototype. It looked like a bad science project. A rack of solar panels stuck on a rotating metal beam that could tilt and lock down for travel. No one in their right mind would invest millions in it, or so you'd think. But behind that messy prototype lay a staggering opportunity. The portable generator market was exploding, worth billions of dollars a year, and nobody had really cornered the solar on wheels niche. As fate would have it, an old customer from Jeff's auto shop, D.A. Watson, saw the idea and was hooked. Watson had a background in software consulting and a bit of money to gamble. He offered to help Jeff set up a company, calling it DC Solar, and they threw around words like energy independence and sustainable revolution to make it shine. Jeff was hungry for a comeback. Watson was hungry for an early retirement. It felt like a match made in heaven, at least on the surface. They aimed their first sales pitch at Hollywood. Movie studios were tired of the loud, stinking diesel generators that powered their sets. Jeff's solar trailers promised quiet, clean, eco-friendly power. In an age where celebrities were obsessed with saving the planet, that promise had real star power. Soon enough, productions like Inception and Valentine's Day gave DC Solar a try, and even Leonardo DiCaprio posted about the trailers. Back then, a celebrity endorsement was almost unstoppable. Jeff took that credibility and ran with it, crafting a personal underdog story that Hollywood and Silicon Valley adored. He told anyone who would listen about growing up in a crime-ridden town, about surviving on grit alone, about building something from scratch with no college degree. He was a blue-collar hero, the perfect narrative for green investors desperate to put their money somewhere socially responsible. His mother would later admit that Jeff had always spun tales to make people feel sorry for him, or just to entertain them. But now, those stories were pure gold. DC Solar found its way to a powerful law firm called Nixon Peabody, which specialized in navigating the complicated world of renewable energy tax credits. And Congress had just tripled those credits. A business could now get a 30% refund on every dollar spent installing solar. Jeff saw dollar signs everywhere. With Nixon Peabody's help, he structured deals where companies could buy DC Solar trailers, get 30% of their federal taxes back, and essentially lease them out to recover the rest. To make it even more irresistible, DC Solar offered to finance 70% of the cost up front, so clients barely had to pay anything. If it all sounded too good to be true, well, it was. But in that moment, nobody wanted to look too closely. Sherwin-Williams was the first big client, paying $29 million for a fleet of 192 trailers. With that one deal, Jeff knew the fraud could go national. US Bank jumped in next, seeing green energy headlines and thinking about those delicious tax breaks. They ignored the glaring question, did these trailers even work? The reality was they didn't. The solar rigs broke down constantly, leaving movie crews scrambling to fire up backup diesel generators. There were even reports of smoke coming out the backs of Jeff's eco-friendly machines, the ultimate slapstick irony. Inside the DC solar production yard, employees only built a polished-looking front row of trailers for inspections. The rest were a jumbled mess of half-finished junk. When a staffer tried to sound the alarm, Jeff shrugged it off, too busy celebrating the cash rolling in and splurging on a $1.3 million house paid in full. The fatal flaw was that nobody really wanted to lease the solar trailers long-term. Without real leases, the scheme had no revenue, no chance to pay back the financing, and no legal basis for tax credits. The IRS had already warned that unused generators would not qualify. Jeff was cornered. There was only one way to keep the dream alive: lie bigger. He decided to use money from new buyers to make phony lease payments to earlier investors, so it would look like the trailers were actually generating returns. The books were massaged to perfection, showing a steady stream of lease income that didn't exist. A textbook Ponzi scheme, except with solar panels as the bait. Valley National Bank came next, ready to pour $76 million into Jeff's empire, after hearing that 80% of his trailers were leased out. In truth, fewer than 5% were even usable. Jeff created fake lease agreements, bribed a T-Mobile employee to sign a contract for 1,000 trailers, and had a former IRS agent on his payroll to help sell the fantasy. That T-Mobile contract alone fooled investors into thinking DC Solar was unstoppable. Once Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway got involved through its subsidiary Geico, the illusion was unstoppable. Buffett was famous for saying he'd invest billions in green energy, and DC Solar looked like a dream come true. Geico eventually bought nearly 8,000 trailers over 3 years, totaling over $1.2 billion in deals. The company saved hundreds of millions in taxes on equipment that mostly didn't exist. To keep up the illusion, Jeff's team removed VIN numbers from trailers owned by older investors and slapped them onto other units to trick inspectors. That way, they could pretend every trailer was accounted for. The scam was so elaborate that even veteran auditors got fooled. Meanwhile, Jeff went on a spending spree. He bought a fleet of 149 luxury cars, a private jet, and a minor league baseball team. He hosted wild parties and even sponsored NASCAR, pasting DC Solar logos on race cars and tracks like he was a true champion of sustainability. The irony was off the charts. This was a man selling a green energy dream while burning through private jets, race cars, and mountains of cash. But Jeff's paranoia grew with every new lie. He installed dozens of cameras around the DC Solar offices, refused to answer employee questions, and ordered non-stop document shredding. Suspicion was leaking into the walls. In 2018, a staff member named Sebastian Yano finally had enough. He tipped off the SEC, exposing the scheme from the inside. By December of that year, federal agents raided DC Solar and put Jeff and Paulette in handcuffs. The house of cards had collapsed overnight. Authorities seized the couple's entire fortune, from offshore bank accounts to their 100-plus car collection. The U.S. Marshals even held the largest one-owner auction in history to liquidate Jeff's prized rides. Warren Buffett's empire lost $340 million. U.S. Bank, Progressive Insurance, and countless other companies were left with worthless paper. Prosecutors called it one of the most shocking green energy frauds ever seen. The numbers were mind-boggling. The trailers were sold at $150,000 apiece, but were worth less than $13,000, making the tax credit loophole a dream come true for anyone willing to believe. And believe they did, until the music stopped. In early 2020, Jeff and Paulette pleaded guilty. Jeff was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Paulette got over 11 years, and their top co-conspirators went down with them. Millions in restitution was ordered, but the money was mostly gone. What remained was a cautionary tale about hype, greed, and blind trust. The judge summed up the entire fiasco in one perfect line: "You were selling air."